Okay, for this course, we basically only going to be covering bid committees. So the three bid committees that are required for a tender process. So as a start, we will start off by going through some definitions and context of where committees fit in the whole supply chain management process and system. And then after that, we will go through the legal framework that governs supply chain in the country. And then we'll go through into the committees themselves. We'll start with the composition of the committees. We will then go into the procedures of what happens in the meetings and how you actually conduct yourselves as committee members. And basically, that's the crux of the course. That's the crux of what we will cover. But for today, I think we'll probably just cover the introduction, definitions, and then the legal framework, and then the actual detail on the specific committees. I think we'll do in the next session, and it will also give you a chance to go through the system. I will encourage you to go on the system because the system is very user friendly, and it actually takes you through the whole course step by step, and it's got a lot of information. So I think even after today's session, I will encourage the learners to cover the sections that we wouldn't have touched on today. Then when we actually meet, because the way this course is supposed to be, it's supposed to be blended in that there's self-learning involved, and then I facilitate when we have the one-on-ones on Zoom. So when we have sessions, if you've gone through on the course on the platform yourself, then it's more fruitful. It's more helpful when we are actually meeting. Yeah. Should I continue and start with the first two sessions?
Yes, we are ready.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Can you see the screen with the slides?
Yes, we can see the screen.
You can move to the next slide. So, as I mentioned earlier, we'll start off with the definitions and the context of supply chain. You can move to the next slide. Okay. Well, I'll keep referring to institutions. Institutions is basically all the constitutional institutions, public entities, as defined by the PFMA. You are a Schedule 3A institution according to the PFMA. So that's in this case, in this context, institution refers to PFMA Schedule 3A for your organization. Next, please. A supply chain is a network between a company and its suppliers. The suppliers that produce and distribute, to produce and distribute a specific product. So basically, a supply chain is basically a link, is a chain of the movement of a product from manufacturing, if it's manufactured, or from where it's sourced at the beginning all the way to where the product is used and using. So it can be a very long chain. Yes. Bidding is an offer to set a price tag to an individual or business for a product or service, or a demand that something be done. So if we take a scenario of an auction, An auction, in auction, you'll be saying your bid. So the person running the auction will be saying, will give a price. You'll say you're accepting a bid. So that price will be the bidding price. In the scenario of a tender or a bidding process, the responders to a tender advertisement or a bidding advertisement will be bidding to render that service or to supply that product to you as the requester. Then obviously whatever they are bidding, they will have a price set on that. A supplier is a person or organization that provides something needed by the business, such as a product. A tender, as I mentioned a bit earlier, is an invitation to bid. RFP, sometimes RFB, as we call it in supply chain. So request for bids or request for proposals. A project or accept a formal offer such as a takeover bid. Tendering usually refers to the process whereby government and financial institutions invite bids for large projects that must be submitted within a finite deadline. So a tender, strictly speaking, in a government context, is any bidding process, competitive process that you get into for anything that will cost anything above 500,000. These thresholds are set by law. I'll touch a bit on them when we are going through the legislative framework on supply chain. So anything over 500,000 must be advertised on the tender bulletin for 21 days, and then a tender process starts. So this is where the bidding committees fit in. A vendor is an individual or entity who sells goods or services for a price to a customer. Okay, that one explains itself. Are you still with me? I'm not moving too fast, I hope.
Yeah, we're still with you.
If you want to interrupt or ask anything, you can just jump in, because I can't see your screen right now. So it's fine, I can see it now. So anytime you want to say something, you can jump in if you want me to clarify something or expand further on it. So procurement management is a method by which items are purchased from external suppliers. The procurement management process involves managing the orders, receipts, reviews, and approval of items from suppliers. So, Futhi, yeah.
Yes,
did that. Yeah, that's part of what Ngosi and Futhi are doing on a daily basis, requesting codes, checking the codes, evaluating the codes,
yes,
communicating to the suppliers that they have been selected, giving them purchase orders and things like that. It's all part of the procurement process. Next, please. Next, please. I'm sorry, I'm not controlling the slides myself, so.
No, it's fine.
My computer decided to do some things I don't understand. Fruitless and wasteful expenditure. I know these are terms that I'm sure you've heard in the supply chain circles, even in the finance circles.
Yeah, we have.
I hope you are keeping a register as an institution of such expenditure. Fruitful and wasteful expenditure means the expenditure which was made in vain would have been avoided had reasonable care been exercised. So it would be in vain, so there was no gain for the institution. Basically, that money was wasted. And yeah. Irregular expenditure is expenditure that's more other than authorized expenditure, incurred in contravention of, or that is not in accordance with the requirements of any applicable legislation.
I just wanted to let the learners that this material is downloadable on the course itself. They can download it. Yes.
Yeah. I also wanted to mention, when you go through the cost, there's a very nice video there that's done by the Auditor General that contrasts irregular expenditure to material irregularities. They define irregular expenditure in very nice detail. This one happens if you don't follow process when you are procuring. So, like I said, supply chain and procurement in the government sector is governed very tightly by law. So the PFMA is very clear on what should happen in the procurement process. And if any of those steps are not followed, or they are neglected or blatantly ignored, then that expenditure might be irregular expenditure. Yeah, so that video is very nice. I recommend that you check it as well. Next slide, please. Okay, accounting authority. So like I mentioned earlier, you are a level as section 3A, schedule 3A entity, isimangaliso, right? So you are governed by an accounting authority as defined by the PFMA. I keep going to the triple PFA. So if you go to the PFMA paragraph 49, the PFMA, then it goes in details on who an accounting authority is. So if your entity is governed, has a board or a controlling body, then that body is the accounting authority for that entity. If your entity doesn't have a controlling body or board, then the chief executive officer will be the accounting authority for that entity. Or some entities, they wouldn't. So chief executive officer or other person in charge of that public entity will be the accounting authority. Yeah. This is important because most of the legislation, instruction notes, all the things that you are going to be reading, they will be referring to accounting authority, accounting officer, and all that. So you must understand where those come in. Okay, that's moving slow. Okay. The context of bid committees. We are still together, né? Thank you.
Yeah.
Bid committees. This is committees that are established in terms of the policy. They are there to prepare specification, bid documents, evaluate the bids, and where authorized, adjudicate the responsive bids. So this basically covers all three. You are required to have at least the 3 committees for any bid or tender process that you go through. So the bid specification committee will be preparing the bids and basically which fits into the preparation of the document itself. And then the bid evaluation committee will be evaluating the bids. And then the adjudication committee will be doing the adjudication. So we'll go in more detail of each of those committees. I know some institutions would have an actual committee for bid opening, for example, where at the time of the closing of the bid, that committee would be there to take the responses and capture them and all that. So I'm not going to go into that committee, or it doesn't have to be a committee. Supply chain functionalities, which you guys are doing. Are we still together?
Yeah.
We start with the bid specification committee. This is just overview. Yeah. Like I said, this is the committee that's responsible for compiling of the bid spec. As you might be aware, the spec must be compiled in an unbiased way so that it allows potential bidders to offer their goods and services. You understand what I mean by unbiased. So give you an example. It must not, okay, basically, before I give you the example, it must not favor a specific supplier, your specification. So when you are drafting the spec, it must allow anyone who is in that space to offer their product so that for your consideration. So when you are doing your spec, make sure it's unbiased. It's not like, for example, brand specific. So you can't say, I'm trying to think of a brand, yeah, in your spec. If you're looking for phones, you can now do I want an iPhone. So if Huawei can give you everything that the iPhone has, why are you buying the iPhone? That one is controversial. Yeah, okay. Any question there?
No. We understand you.
Then the bid spec committee may be comprised of officials from the department requiring the spec, the goods or the service. Okay, those officials, one or more suitable qualified specialists, officials, may even include an external consultant under the direction of the officials. Okay, so obviously the requirement comes from the end user. The end user is the one who knows, understands what they need. They would basically initiate the whole process in the sense that the need comes from them. So it makes sense for them to be part of the bid specification committee. So when you are drafting the specification as the committee, they must be part of that so that you don't deviate or go out of the original need that was required by the end user. Are we understood that? So, yeah. So, and then any one or more suitably qualified specialist officials. So you can have other people who are experts in that field. They might not necessarily be working in that specific department. So, but and there is proof that they are suitably qualified to assist in that area. They may as well be included in the spec committee. In some cases, you might need an external consultant to assist with the drafting of the spec. So in certain cases, you might not have that skill in-house. Then you can get a consultant to help you draft the spec. But it's very important that you understand that the consultant plays reports to the organization in the sense that they don't run the process. They are consulting. So they don't come in and take over. Yes, sir.
Yes, I want to ask in that matter. For instance, we are a public entity. Are we allowed maybe to go and take someone from the municipality to do that?
Yes.
Not as a consultant, but as an individual, just.
Oh no, that's totally allowed. So you can approach other departments to assist as much as possible. But we will touch on this a bit more as we go further. It's important that when you are compiling, you'll see when you go into a tender process, obviously you're building a file at the end. So at the end of when everything is done, you will have a file. And then you will have chosen a supplier with their quote and everything. In that file, you're basically filing everything in the process. So included in that file would be important things like the appointment letters of the members. So so that these things are properly documented. So where the accounting authority says, yes, you can invite so and so from this institution to be part of that, make sure you have it in writing. Do you have a CEO or how is your?
CEO. It's a CEO.
Okay, so you make sure that the CEO signs that off, put it in the file, as well as any of the members of the committee anyway. You must have the appointment letters. The auditors, one of the things that they ask for is where are the appointment letters. Even if you have a standing committee, because I know some institutions do that, you appoint people for a specific period to sit in a specific committee. You make sure that you copy those letters, you put them as part of your file for each project. So because when they audit, they audit project by project. You still with me?
Yeah.
Okay. It is recommended that the specification should be approved by the accounting authority or his or her delegate, which in this case can be the adjudication committee. So in the process, okay, let me step back, maybe 3 steps back. In the planning process, someone would decide, okay, I'm going to need furniture, or I'm going to hire 10 people next year. I'm going to need furniture for 10 people, computers for 10 people. We are now in October 2020. When we are doing the planning for next year and the budgeting and the procurement planning, you understand your procurement plans must be submitted to Treasury by the end of March for the financial year. Yeah. So in your planning and budgeting and all that, so all that planning is done beforehand. So the end users would decide, okay, next year I might need desks, I might need computers, I might need this and that and that. So they will put that in their budgets, which also obviously goes into your procurement plan. Yeah. Yes. Then the procurement plans are submitted to Treasury. Then SCM starts with their plan for the year, their procurement plan. So depending on when the things are supposed to be delivered, then you do your project plans for each of the projects. So you say, okay, I'm going to need desks in September. So I must have a tender awarded by, let's say, June, so that the contracts are finalized. If the turnaround time for those guys is 30 days, they must have an order by August for me to receive my desks by September. So basically, this is the overview of what happens. So then you move back from that, then you plan all that, then you do your project plan for that project for the desks. So then you start now, you need specifications for the desks. So the end user just told you they want desks or whatever. I'm just using desks as a rough example. Then your bid specification committee is convened. So members are appointed. A bid specification date is set. You guys are going to meet and consider the spec for the desks that should be delivered in September 2021. So maybe that's happening in March 2021. So the committee meets, they consider the draft spec, they draft the spec and finalize the spec. Someone is taking minutes of what's happening in the committee. The resolutions of the committee are done and signed off by the committee. The final draft spec is done and approved by that committee, the bid specification committee. Once that is done, then it goes to the bid adjudication committee for approval. You haven't advertised yet. Goes to the bid adjudication committee. The bid adjudication committee considers the spec and approves it. Okay, we agree with the spec. It's within the vision and the strategy of the organization, and it's aligned to where we are going as an organization, and it's not prejudicing anyone. It's evaluatable. It's not biased, and all that. And they approve it. Then you advertise the tender after the bid adjudication committee approves. Are you still with me?
Yeah.
I think I'm just okay. Yes.
Yeah, no, I just want to ask,
Yes.
does it have to be a adjudication committee who approve the specs, or it can be a CEO?
Yeah. Okay. Like you remember, like when I was defining the accounting authority.
Yeah, yeah.
The CEO or the board or the body governing the organization, the entity. So in this case, if you read this line and line number 1 here on this slide, it's recommended that the spec is approved by the accounting authority, which in this case would be the CEO.
Yes, CEO, yeah.
Or his or her delegate, which
all right.
committee, the BAC.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah. I'm dwelling on this a bit because of one major reason. Spec, in my experience, spec is the biggest weakness of the whole chain. Like, so the drafting, it compromises everything. Like I know things is just a small bit, it's a small insignificant committee. A lot of focus is set on the bid evaluation committee and the bid adjudication committee. And the backing part is not focused on. And in my experience, all the mistakes that happen at evaluation and at adjudication are because of what happened at specification.
Yes.
Because if your spec is not clear on how it's going to be evaluated, for example, the evaluation committee will struggle evaluating it. And then they will start becoming creative, and then they contravene certain regulations because they are now trying to be creative. You understand? And if you were thorough in your spec step, then everyone's job is easy. So things like criteria are nicely defined. What you want is properly defined, and you understand all those things. Even the suppliers understand exactly what you want when they submit their proposals. It's very clear to evaluate. Everyone evaluates. So it's very clear when someone is trying to be corrupt and crook the system and what, when everything is clear from the start. Yeah. So I'm dwelling on this because for me, this is the most critical step in the whole tendering process. Yeah. And did I go through everything there? I know I dwelt too much. Can you go back, please? I just want to check the one last bullet there.
All right.
Okay, that's basically I was touching on that. So the education part, the approval by the CEO or the adjudication of the spec is to make sure, like I said, that it's aligned to strategic objectives and things like that. Yeah. You will see when we are doing the adjudication, the composition of the adjudication is normally senior staff in the organization. So it's people who understand the strategy of the organization, where it's going and all that. So if, for example, the organization is not going to be there in 2 years' time, these are the people who would know first. So if now you want to buy desks for 3 years from now, they can easily say, okay, no, this is not going to work for us because we won't be here in 3 years' time. Yeah. You can go to the next slide, please. The bid evaluation committee, the BEC, this is where,
sorry to disturb you. Just a question of clarity on bid specification. A specification, does it have a format, or it's upon us how we draft it?
It's upon you how you draft it.
Oh, okay.
But having said that, it helps to have templates in place.
That's what I'm trying to find out. Is there maybe a template
As we go through the course, I will share some of these documents with you. I'll share some templates, examples. Let me note that actually. I'll share some templates of examples of a specification, because obviously there's certain areas that you want to make sure that you cover in your specifications. So when you have a template, at least guides you say, I still haven't touched this area. I haven't touched this area.
Well, yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks.
So out of that spec committee, obviously you will now have a bid document.
Yeah. Yes.
All your SPD documents and all that. I think that's going to be going out to the suppliers. So it helps to have a template of what your bid documents look like. As a if you go now and just go on the e-tender website, just choose any supplier or even go to any of the institutions. Just check. You'll see that the documents look the same. Like you can go to the SARS document, to the SARS website, for example, pull out their tender thing. Their documents are like standard. They always look the same. So it helps to have a template.
All right, thanks.
The BEC, I'm going to go a bit more details later on the committees. This is just quick overview. Committee, the BEC committee is responsible for the evaluation, which includes verification of the capability of the bidder to execute the contract from a technical, managerial, and financial perspective. So, like I said, on your speccing thing, you need to be clear what you want technically and all that, like how much it's going to cost and all. They must be able to code properly. I'll give you this much. So as part of your speccing, you will have an evaluation criteria. This is where the evaluation committee will be guided and assisted to understand exactly how they evaluate the tender. So for example, you might have a section A functionality, which is not compulsory for every bid. So for bids that are complicated, you might put functionality where you evaluate specific things. So for example, on the technicalities or their managerial experience and stuff like that, you can put in your functionality. So these are all things that you would have done already at spec stage. The evaluation committee doesn't create these things at the PEC meeting. They hit the ground running. And then they also verify if the spec of quality, functionality, dimensions, design, customer support, and guarantees and etc. So my desk example, if you want a desk at spec, you would have said what size desk you want. And so that at evaluation, you just don't take the cheapest and run with it, because it might be too small for what the end user requires. So you must make sure it's clear. Or I've seen cases where people buy a very expensive boardroom table, but it's very low and it doesn't sit properly, like it's very uncomfortable. So because the spec was not clear. Next, or some of the boardroom tables, I've had complaints that the boardroom table is very thin. So the people sitting across are too close. So these are very critical things that might be a joke. I'm saying it as a joke now, and the client that I'm talking about, it was very important that the people sitting across are far from the people this side, so that, for example, it's not easy for them to just reach over and grab someone and slap them or something like that, because some of the engagements require that kind of interaction. They evaluate whether the bid offers value for money. You go through that whole evaluation process. You know, there's an 80-20 process and a 90-10 process for evaluation. You know, the formulas for the evaluations. You don't have to memorize it. You can always refer to your SPD6. Yeah, so it's a very straightforward formula to compare people's prices and all that, and their BEE levels and everything. So they evaluate the number of contracts. They check the number of contracts awarded to the bidder in context during the preceding 12 months. And they do the allocation of preference points. They do representativity in composition of the bidders and possibilities for fronting. They are the ones who actually check all these things. The BEC, in my experience, is the one that takes the most flack when something goes wrong. So when the forensic investigators come there, whooping is the BEC. Because the recommendation on who to appoint comes from the BEC. So I guess people find it as the easiest step to creep in corruption. So I know I'm not talking things of integrity and things like that here, but those are very fundamental issues at this level of supply chain management. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Still on the BEC. See, I told you the BEC gets the most focus. You see, you only had 4 bullets for the bid spec, or was it not 3? They evaluate the success of the failure of executing contracts awarded to the bidder previously. This is important as a point of digressing. As part of your contract management, obviously, I hope you do performance management of your contractors, where you have regular interaction with your contractors. When they are not performing, you tell them straight, you are not performing in this area, and you document that. When they are not performing to a point of the contract being cancelled, that is documented accordingly. Then the BEC considers things like that as well, to say, you understand, when somebody defaults and then the next thing you are giving him another contract for R1 billion, it's problematic. But obviously, there is the 2 registers with the National Treasury, the defaulters and the restricted suppliers. The BEC obviously considers those registers as well, and must consider those registers as well to check, are the bidders listed there? Have they defaulted on any government contract before, and are they blacklisted? Very important. And then they check tax clearance certificate. I know these days you use the code. They can give you the code that you can check with SARS on the e-filing platform. But it's very crucial. It's also on the same principle. How do you give someone government work when they are not paying government their tax? So that's where the BEC checks that. They check the compulsory registration with the supplier database, CSD. I'm trying to get to the acronym. Yeah. So that's why, like, obviously in your bid document, all these things will be listed there. We want proof that you're registered with CSD. We want tax clearance. We want that. This one, NIP program requirements for anything over 10 million rands. They check all that. Next slide, please. According to prescripts 2 of PFA, the bids must obviously be evaluated in accordance with the preference point system, which I just mentioned earlier, the 80-20 versus 90-10. And the formulas, they do all the calculations and give people points according to the calculation. You guys are with me now when I'm talking 80-20, 90-10 and formulas and stuff. You've done that.
Yeah.
Your answer doesn't sound very convincing. Okay. They check any specific goal for which a point may be awarded must be clearly specified in the invitation to submit a bid. This stresses the point I was making earlier. Everything clear up front, not introduced at the evaluation stage. So the 2017 Triple PFA regulations, they allow for pre-qualification and things like that. Now, so all those things must be communicated upfront. You can't now be introducing it at evaluation stage. The evaluation committee should evaluate all bids received and submit a report and recommendations regarding the awarding of those bids to the adjudication committee. So after the BEC is done with their work, they will have a report. Most institutions would have a supply chain report. So the supply chain official or whoever is, supply chain official in the BEC prepare the report, or the secretariat, normally it's the supply chain. Then the minutes are done by the secretary, and that report is signed off as correct by the BEC. There's been scenarios where these things change after the committee, and then they go to the adjudication committee. So the chairperson of the BEC must make sure that the report is a true reflection of what was in the committee meeting, and then it goes to the adjudication committee. The BAC is a cross-functional team as well. So basically all three of them are cross-functional in the sense, like I explained, the end user features in the spec. Your BEC as well might be cross-functional. At least one member of the BAC must be from the supply chain department. So most of the time it would be the supply chain manager who would be part of the BAC. The committee must be comprised of at least 4 members at appropriately senior level. Like I explained earlier, it's more at a strategic level. The education is not evaluating. They're considering the evaluation committee's recommendation. So they don't sit there and start from scratch, calculating scores and everything. They can verify that the scores are correct and all that. That the process that the BEC followed was correct, but they don't do the actual evaluation. The accounting authority will determine the delegated powers exercised by the education committee, which may be expected to take a recommendation to the accounting authority for final approval or ratification. Yeah. Next slide, please. Any questions?
Yeah, there is one.
Yes.
I will take you back to the bid specification committee.
Yes.
Yeah, it just came into me now because I just saw that you mentioned that on adjudication they should at least be 4 members in a senior level. So on a specification, do we have a minimum? Should I say a minimum?
Yeah, no, yeah, you are right in saying it's a minimum. It should be more than one.
Should be more than one.
It can be one person as a spec committee, but it's not legislated to say it must be a minimum of 5 people or something. The adjudication there's an to the adjudication committee that it must be at least 4. So there's certain functions obviously in the committee. So you need someone to be a secretary. You need a chairperson. You need the end user there. So you see, at least I'm already at 3.
Yeah.
Find the end user or someone else could be the chair, one of the 2 or 3 can be. But I would say 3 going up makes sense. But it can't be one person. You can't be 40 on your own spec committee.